You're watching PEGRI TV, Rhode Island's public access channel.
Good evening, I'm Bill Mulholland, and welcome to Good Sports Classics. Tonight, Pawtucket native and National Hockey League 25-year play-by-play veteran broadcaster Dave Goucher returns to Good Sports after a 30-year hiatus. Dave played 3 years on the Tormund hockey team, and upon graduating in 1987, he matriculated to Boston University and earned a BS in broadcast journalism in 1993. From 1993 through 2000, he worked hockey's minor leagues the last 5 years as a radio play-by-play announcer for his hometown Providence Bruins. In 2000, Dave became the radio voice of the Boston Bruins for the next 17 years, and in 2017, the newly minted Las Vegas franchise tabbed Dave as the inaugural Golden Knights television play-by-play broadcaster. Welcome back to Good Sports Classics, Dave.
30 years.
Hard to believe, huh?
The time?
I'm still here, too.
Me too.
Yes, you are.
Believe it or not, yeah.
Now, 30 years ago, Dave, you were a guest on Good Sports, and the last question on the show was, where do you want to be in the year 2000? So let's go back 30 years and see what you had to say.
Let's jump ahead 5 years from now, the year 2000. Career-wise, where do you want to be, and what do you want to be doing?
Well, I'd love to be in the National Hockey League. I think the goal, and if my voice keeps cracking like that, I think the goal is to work at the highest level possible. And certainly in hockey, it's the NHL. If it's in Boston, that's great. If it's with another team in another city, that's fine too. I think when you decide you're going to go this career route, you also have to be prepared to move, and which I've done. I mean, as you mentioned, living in West Virginia, it's nice that I'm able to come back and live back home now and live in Pawtucket with my dad. And but 5 years down the road, I'd love to be in the National Hockey League, wherever that might be.
Well, it's funny, Bill, like that kid, and he was a kid, that guy
absolutely.
With the sweet sweater. I mean, gosh, I must have been 25 or 6, I guess.
You were.
Yeah, and all I knew was that kid wanted an opportunity to try and make a run of it in broadcasting, and preferably in the NHL. As I mentioned there, it's funny how that ended up happening. But you don't know what's going to, you have no idea of knowing how the future is going to unfold. I just knew that I didn't have a plan B. My dad, God rest him, had drove truck for 30 years. I didn't have any interest in continuing in carrying on the family business, but I knew I wanted to try and give it a shot. I didn't know how long it was going to take. It is hilarious though that, 5 years later, the Boston Bruins job came open, and I, somehow was able to land it.
You were prophetic.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, and I'll tell you a little backstory. Gene LaManchi, who I interned at Channel 6 a couple of years when I was at Boston University. Ken Bell and Gene LaManchi were the sports anchors there. Wonderful, wonderful guys. So in 1995, the Providence Bruins job was open. I was in Wheeling, West Virginia, and I called Gene because Gene was a great sounding board. He had since gone on to Channel 7 for a long time in Boston. And I was a little apprehensive. Should I leave? Am I ready to leave? And he said, let me tell you something, Dave. If the Providence Bruins make you an offer, you're out of Wheeling. I said, really? He said, because let's say 5 years from now, the Boston Bruins are looking for an announcer, and they hire the guy that's in Providence, and it's not you, you would be beside yourself.
Yes.
And that's exactly what happened.
Exactly, right.
He kind of called it. I was just hoping I could get anywhere in the NHL, but the fact that it ended up being, the Bruins for my first NHL job was kind of too good to be true.
Absolutely. Now, Dave, in 1996, you began your second season as the P. Bruins play-by-play announcer. What did that job entail?
A lot, for not a lot of money.
Okay.
That's what I remember.
Got to pay your dues, right?
Oh, pay your dues. Well, it's funny, Bill. So at that level, you broadcast the games, obviously, but that was one of probably 5 or 6 jobs. You were also the media relations director for the team, so you wrote all the press releases. You handled all the press passes for visiting media and visiting scouts. You set up the press box. You took the players on their player appearances in the community. You know, if you're visiting schools or hospitals, you booked all the team travel on the road. So we would make a road trip to Fredericton, St. John, and St. John's.
Yeah.
I booked the hotels. I handled the per diem for the players. I set up their passes for their families on the road.
Did you know that going into the job?
It was
Somewhat?
similar in Wheeling. It
Oh,
was
was it? Okay,
similar.
true.
I don't think I did the team travel in Wheeling, but in the off season you sold advertising for the team. You know, the dashboard ads or the program ads or radio ads, whatever. At that level, they're not going to hire 4 or 5 people to do 5 different jobs. They're going to hire one person to do 4 or 5 different jobs. But I always thought all the other stuff, it was part of it, right? Because it allowed me to do what I really wanted to do, which was to broadcast the games.
Sure. Now, Dave, for the 1999 campaign, the Providence Bruins captured the American Hockey League's Calder Cup. Talk about that run for the Cup.
Well, it came off, Bill, the year before. The team was dead last. You know, they literally went from the outhouse to the penthouse. And,
Okay, I like that line.
Yeah, they were, but Peter Laviolette was the coach of that championship team, and Billy Armstrong was the assistant coach, and half of that team had gone through a very long season the year before. They only won 19 games, and I always think, my heavens, you should win out of 80 games. You should probably win 25 just by the luck of the draw. But that team was loaded and won the Calder Cup in Game 5 in Providence, and just to be a part of that.
A thrill for you?
Oh, yeah, because, it's funny, Bill, you could do this a long time, and I've been blessed to do it a long time, and the teams you're around may never win anything, when you're just happy to kind of be along for the ride. So to have that team win it, and then I still have a picture to this day of me and Peter Laviolette holding the Calder Cup, and we were both a lot younger back then. And we had a parade through downtown Providence that had 10,000 people.
And you're the hometown boy.
Yeah, they were like, how the heck did this happen? So we
Absolutely.
finished right at, the late Mayor Cianci. I'll never forget it. He greeted us right at City Hall, and there was a picture of him and Dennis Vasky, our captain, in front page of the Providence Journal, like arm in arm with the "We're #1" sign. So
Yeah,
it was
that was big time.
pretty awesome. To this day, that's the only Calder Cup the team's won, and the team's been in Providence
I didn't
for
know that.
30 plus years.
Oh.
But to be a part of it is just, to be along for a ride like that was great.
And that's just your first cup. And you've been very lucky with everything else. So, Dave, in 2000, at the age of 30, you moved up to the major leagues, just as you had predicted, as the Boston Bruins radio play-by-play broadcaster. You've got a couple of great stories on how you got that job.
Yeah, the first one that comes to mind is I had been, by that point, 7 years in the minor leagues, as you mentioned earlier, Bill, and it's, 1 year turns into 3, turns into 5, 6, and, you're wondering, are you ever going to make it? So the P Bruins were getting ready to go on a road trip to Quebec City for the playoffs, and Bob Beers, who I ended up working with doing the Bruins games for a long time on radio, was playing for the Providence Bruins as a defenseman, and he had kind of he was kind of going back and forth, radio broadcast, color analyst Bruins, playing for us late in the season of the playoffs, and he had kind of given me a bit of an inkling the job might open up. So I went to, it's now the Hilton next to Amped.
Yes.
Formerly the Dunk, formerly the old Providence Civic Center. And we were going on a road trip to Quebec City for the playoffs, and I went, you better get comfortable on a bus if you're going to be on it for 8 hours. So I went and got the Boston Globe and the Boston Herald and the Projo, and there was an article in the Herald that said Bob Newmeyer, God rest Newmy, he was the radio announcer for the Bruins, Newmeyer to leave Bruins post, Chuck Caton expected to be successor. And I'm like, Chuck Caton was the great radio voice for the Hartford Whalers, and Hartford, the Whalers and Chuck had relocated to North Carolina a few years before. The thought was he was going to want to come back to New England. So I remember reading this headline and thinking, how was the game over before I even got in the game?
Yeah, what about me?
What
right?
about Dave?
Yeah.
So I'm doing the minor league team for 5 years. Anyway, the general manager of WBZ Radio at the time, who carried the games long before 98.5, the Sports Hub, was quoted in the article. His name was Ted Jordan. And I didn't even have WBZ's number. Like, you remember a Rolodex? I didn't even have them in my
Absolutely.
Rolodex. So I called information. You'd call, right, 411.
Yes.
I said, could I have WBZ Radio, Boston, Sodersfield Road? So I called. This is like at 8:30 in the morning. I said, is Ted Jordan there, please? And for whatever reason, nobody said, who are you? or he's not around, or can I take a message? And they patched me through
Really?
to the guy that runs WBZ Radio. Well, then it kind of caught me off guard because I didn't think I'd be able to talk to him. So you know how, what's that phrase? You got to have your elevator speech ready. You know, you get 5 floors to go in an elevator. You better make your case if you want to with somebody real quick. So I was like, Mr. Jordan?
Yes.
So I'm Dave Goucher, and I've been doing the games in Providence, and I was very interested in that. I saw that Bob Neumeyer's leaving, and I said, but I'm getting ready to go on a road trip to Quebec, and I could hear him flipping through his calendar, and he says, well, when are you back? And I said, I don't know, Friday. He goes, all right, come in Friday at 2. I was like, just like that, I had an interview.
Wow.
So. You got to have a little good fortune on your side,
You
right?
do, certainly.
So what ended up happening?
You got to be prepared,
Yeah.
right, for the opportunity.
Chuck Caton decided he was going to stay put in Carolina, and every time I'd see Chuck in the ensuing years, I would thank him for not taking the Bruins
Rightfully
job.
so.
And I think my feeling on it is, Bill, once they kind of moved on from Chuck and they opened it up more to guys that were in the AHL, guys like me, that improved my chances greatly. I ended up having to go in and audition at WBZ with Bob. We sat in an empty conference room calling a game off a monitor that might have been a 20-inch monitor in a dead quiet, I think we called it period. It wasn't a game, but a dead quiet conference
For the
room
first time that you have ever done something like that?
for an audition.
Yeah.
And I was like, is this how we're deciding the next radio announcer for the Bruins? But it wasn't. They just wanted to see if we had any chemistry on the air, which, we did have chemistry on the air. So that was, but it was probably a 2-month process. And I think they had 60 people, and they kind of whittled it down to the final 5 to audition, then to 3. And then they called, and they said, if you're agreeable, Dave, we'd like to make you an offer. If I'm agreeable, I'd walk up there backwards. So anyway, that was kind of, of all the jobs back then, that was, I grew up listening to the Bruins on radio and TV. That was my team. So
Sure.
to be able to get that, as you mentioned, at 30 was really was beyond belief.
Very
for me.
special for you, yes. Now, Dave, you've got a funny story about your very first road trip with the Boston Bruins. So tell me about it.
Funny now, it was
Not then.
It was nerve-wracking back then. Well, so Pat Burns was the coach of the Bruins, and Pat could be, and sadly Pat's been gone a while now too. Could be an intimidating guy, and I always wished I got to know Pat more to know him more, because he got fired 8 games into that season, my first season.
Oh.
He got let go. But the first road trip was, we were, back then it was what still is LA, Anaheim, San Jose. We're going out west. I think Edmonton we might have been a 5 or might have been a 10-day road trip. So my first several years doing the Bruins games, I was living in Warwick, because I bought a house there doing the P Bruins, and I would just make the ride. So the team flew out of Hanscom Field up in Bedford, I think still do, north of Boston. That's where their charter would fly out of. So we had a 9 a.m. flight to LA. So I left my house in Warwick at 6. I'm like, if it takes me 2.5 hours, I'm fine. But it's 60 plus miles. I get on 95 and I'm up around Thurbers Avenue, and there's a trailer truck with wood, logs for homes, spilled over across the highway. Oh my goodness, right? Off the highway, wind through, get back on past the Capitol building, go through Pawtucket, get up through Attleboro. Now I'm in I think I was in Foxborough, another accident. Highway shut down. So Peter Laviolette was the assistant coach then for the Bruins. We had both moved on
up,
together. Yeah. So I'm like, now it's 8 o'clock, and I'm like, oh man, if I don't make this flight. So I called Peter, and he was on the plane. This is at 8:15, and I'm saying, Lavi, and I didn't want him to let on he was talking to me, because he was sitting right across the aisle from Pat Burns. And I'm like, he doesn't need to know the new guy is a moron who can't make the plane. So I said, Lavi, whatever you do, stall the pilot, go dump some fuel out of the wings. I said, I can't miss this flight. And he was being very cagey. But all right, yep, okay, I got you. So I get to Hanscom Field, it's 8:45. And as I say, we're going for 10, 12 days. So you got a lot of stuff. You got your luggage, you got your work bag. And I can see the tail of the plane is still there. So I'm running, get on the plane. And I go by Pat Burns, and I say, sorry, Pat. And he really didn't. He's like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, you made it. So
this is
I'm
easy,
like,
huh?
Oh, that's
All
it?
right,
You made it,
yeah.
right? So we're sitting on the plane, and my heart's coming out of my chest. And we've all been just awful, rushing to make a flight, but especially your first road trip with the Bruins. So I don't know, it's 9:05. We're supposed to take off at 9. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, why are we still on the ground? 9:15. Mike O'Connell, who was the general manager of the Bruins, might have been his first year. He comes walking on the plane with his luggage on wheels, whistling away. He got stuck in a different accident. They were waiting for him.
Not for you.
That plane would have been long gone. So he's just, I'm like, oh my goodness. So never again, Bill. That was it. From that day forward, like team planes, I'm like, but it was, talk about nerve-wracking. But if he didn't hit a different accident, I would have been flying myself one way to Los Angeles with no notice.
And probably a one-way back, right?
Why don't you stay?
Now, Dave, during your first 3 years with the Boston Bruins, they were not very good. So tell us how you got through those 82-game schedules for those 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just, you try to, at some nights, make, chicken salad out of chicken, you know what?
Yeah.
I don't think you can beat the dead horse. I mean, if fans know they're not real good, but I mean, I think you have a right, you have an obligation to say that. But there's ways to do it without piling on. And you try to keep it entertaining and informative, and just try to, I say, they struggled, Bill. I mean, my second year they made the playoffs. My third year they made it, but they were all very short stints. They weren't a legitimate Stanley Cup contender. So I think you just try as best you can to stick with what's going on the ice. Try to make it fun. I always think, in my job now in Vegas, like, people are watching the games and they want to release from their normal lives, right?
Correct.
Come home
Absolutely.
from work, put their feet up, turn the radio on, turn the TV on. The last thing they need to hear is the team announcer beating the heck out of the team. So I think that's how I tried to kind of go through it.
Okay.
And then they finally, they turned a corner, mid-2000s. But those first few years, they were not really contenders at all. But then they obviously changed all that.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So in 2007, the Bruins hired Claude Julien as their head coach, and you experienced 7 great seasons, culminating in 2011 with winning the Stanley Cup. I want you to bring our Good Sports audience back to that year where the Bruins defeated Vancouver in 7 games on their home ice. Regale us with a few stories, and also talk about your now famous call at the end of Game 7.
Famous or infamous, or both?
Well, okay.
No. I think it's fun to be remembered for anything, and I guess to be remembered for, a team winning a Stanley Cup, and whatever you said, the get the duck boats ready thing was. I kind of thought about it, Bill, the morning of that 7th game.
I would think you would, right?
Yeah, well, Doc Emmerich, who was the preeminent NHL,
Absolutely,
the
yes.
best, and he had said to me,
one only,
and he was covering that series on TV, national television, and so we were around each other a lot. And I remember asking Doc, because he had called so many huge moments, and he said, Vin Scully told me once, when it comes to big moments, you don't want to leave it completely to chance. Give it a little bit of thought as to what you might want to say. And I'm not a big fan of people, and I guess everyone's to each their own, that, it's almost like they've got a paragraph and a half. Here's what I'm going to, I don't like it. To me, the greatest call ever is Al Michaels, Do You Believe in Miracles?
Yes.
There's no way he could have ever given that a lot of thought, because no one ever thought that the U.S. was going to beat the Soviets. So I didn't want to get too wrapped up in trying to memorize 5 sentences, And I figured if it was good enough for Doc and Vin Scully, it's good enough for me. So I just kind of thought about it that morning a little bit, and because here's the other thing I tried to, I forget about it now, but it's important to remember. All the other teams in Boston had won, the Red Sox had ended the drought,
yes.
Right? They won 2 by then, 04 and 07. The Patriots won their first 3. The Celtics had won it in 08. So the Bruins are the team that hadn't won it in 39 years. They were kind of the last team of that era. And I remember watching all these other duck boat parades.
Okay.
All these other teams.
Yeah.
And I would just remember thinking they're finally going to get their own duck boat parade, their own celebration. So that's kind of where it came from. I remember that morning sitting in Vancouver. The games were at 5 o'clock Vancouver time, so there were no morning practices, no skates, no interviews. All that stuff was done the day before. And I remember just going and sitting outside. It's a gorgeous day. Vancouver, when the weather's good, is a beautiful city, unbelievable city. And sitting out where the Olympic Cauldron was in 2010 for the Winter Games, I sat out there. I can still kind of see where I was sitting. Had a coffee and just gave it some thought. And then people, kind of texting, enjoy the moment and everything else. And they get up 4-0, Bill, after the second period in Game 7. And there was no way they were going to lose. I knew that. So I remember thinking in that second intermission, oh, you better get it. You better get it together.
Yeah. Go ahead.
But no, then I just, it was kind of like a duck boat parade, and it still is now in Boston, is emblematic of your team winning a championship. So that was kind of, when that phrase,
and it's so local too that somebody else in another part of the country wouldn't even understand, but we all knew exactly that.
Yeah, and
classic.
That's what it was about.
Yeah?
If you lived in Chicago, I didn't really care. I knew in Boston, everyone knew what a duck boat parade meant. So that was kind of where it came from.
So the end of the game, Vancouver people start rioting in the streets, right? You got a great story about being in the locker room. Go ahead, tell that story.
So it was funny. So the broadcasters for the Bruins back then, we would travel with the team during the regular season, and then in the playoffs, there was they had extra players and extra staff, and there really wasn't room for the broadcasters. So myself and Bob and Jack Edwards and Andy Brickley, Bob and I were calling the game, and Jack and Brick were there doing stuff for Nesson. So the broadcasters were staying in Vancouver that night of Game 7, win or lose. Our flights weren't until the next day, I think, next day or two. I think I left the next day. So we were sitting in, we were very, we were in that locker room in Vancouver, and every time I go back there, I can still kind of see it. And it's just bedlam. It's just beer and champagne and cigars and people and the Stanley Cup, and it's very sticky, and you can't move. And but then the team was leaving. The team was either way, win or lose. They were getting out of Vancouver. If they lost, they didn't want to stay. And if they won, they wanted to get back to Boston to start to celebrate. So, but as you mentioned, so we're sitting in one of the locker room area in Vancouver, and the team leaves, and me and the other 3 broadcasters are like, well, now what do we do? And there was a TV up on the wall, and the city was on fire. Like they were flipping cars over, and I'm like, well, we can't go out there.
Right, don't want to go out there.
Don't want to go out there. Certainly with our Bruins media pass on, get mugged or something. So anyway, we were like, oh, now what do we do? And just as we kind of were trying to sort that through, somebody wheeled in a big bin from the Vancouver locker room. It was supposed to be part of their celebration of Molson Canadian beer.
The Canucks.
It was supposed to be theirs. And we sat there for like an hour, and we drank all that beer. And then it was safe to go out, kind of by then it had died down. But so we sat there and drank the beer that was supposed to be part of the Canucks celebration.
Cool. And so what was the duck boat parade like? Let us live vicariously through you.
Yeah, well, it's funny, having never, the P Bruins one is one thing, and it was great. But, now you're talking, I think I ran into Mayor Marty Walsh a couple of years ago, and he said that Bruins parade was still one of the biggest. I think there were 1.2 million people.
Wow.
So it's just, I always remember about it, just the noise level, just the roar of, coming out of, back then before they redeveloped all the land in front of the garden, that's where all the duck boats lined up. We left from that front parking lot where the old garden used to be.
Yeah.
And just coming out and taking the right and going up by Channel 7 and just kind of winding our way through. And I remember people like hanging off, they would climb in trees just to get a better view. They had to be 30 or 40 deep along the sidewalk. And I remember like people were hanging out of office building windows. And
what was the noise like? Was it like just
roar,
a din?
Din roar that until the Vegas parade, I never heard again, And I'll never forget it, Bill, just going down, Boylston Street's a one-way, we'll say for the sake of argument, coming this way. Well, for the parades, they shut Boylston down and you go the other way because it just makes more sense for the flow of the parade. And I remember like the Boston Public Garden, people just packed, and they were at the Public Garden and in the Common. And I have a picture somewhere, somebody took me on that duck boat just, smiling. And I was like, man, it was unbelievable. To be in the middle of all that was just beyond belief. And now Boston teams have won a few since 2011, And I watched that parade. I'm like, man, that's that.
The memories come back.
Oh yeah. Well, every time I go down Boylston Street now, which isn't a lot, but
Yeah.
if I'm back in the city, I can still see it because you went the other way.
That is so
Yeah.
cool,
Oh,
huh?
that was awesome. So good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, Dave, I want you to talk about the Boston Marathon bombing in April of 2013. Bruins were still playing at that point in time, right?
Yeah.
And how the Boston Bruins administration sort of responded to that, and yourself also.
Yeah, well, I just think, Bill, look, it's, I think sports teams have a way of bringing people together, right?
Positively.
I always joke around, you couldn't agree on, nobody seems to agree on much of anything these days, but sports teams can give you something. And that was the lockout year in the NHL of 12-13, so the NHL played an abbreviated season. They didn't start till January.
Oh, okay.
So the Bruins were still playing regular season games in mid-April, whereas otherwise they'd be in probably halfway through the first round of the playoffs. Anyway.
Yes.
So when the bombings happened, we were supposed to have a game that night. That obviously got postponed because they couldn't find these two guys that had done the bombings. Then we played, I think, on the Wednesday, and Rene Rancourt, legendary
Voice.
anthem singer for the Bruins.
Absolutely, yes.
He sang the anthem that night, and he started it and then let the crowd sing it a cappella.
I remember.
And I'll never
Yeah,
forget. I
bring
get
tears.
goosebumps thinking,
Yeah,
oh,
even now.
yeah. Still, like, I
and you were
remember-
there, right?
I was there in the radio booth, and
Yeah.
we would usually, I think we would usually carry the anthem live, if I remember right. But we absolutely were that night.
Yeah.
And I remember he finished it, and
And so what did you say? So now it's
I
done.
just
Now it's your
said-
turn to talk.
I just think I said something like, I had to take a second just to kind of make sure I was going to be okay. You know,
Yeah.
I think I said, it's funny, Rene, I remember he had started doing the anthem for the Bruins in 1976, which was the bicentennial year. And I think I said something about, he's been doing this since 1976, but it has never meant more to this fan base than what he just did tonight, something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to Rene, I think I talked to him the next day, I called him, and I said to him, he said, I didn't know what I was going to do, and he goes, I was nervous. And he said, but once the crowd started going, then the only thing to do was to let them keep singing it. So, yeah, I just think, look, teams, the Bruins ended up going back to the Cup final that year, and that was also the Red Sox, David Ortiz's famous speech, well,
Right.
this is our city.
Yep.
I just think teams have a way, even if it's for a couple of hours a day, and it's not a cure-all, of taking people's focus away from all that pain, and giving them something else to listen to or something else to watch. So I think, and the Celtics are still going at that point too. I think all the teams tried to help in that effort.
Sure. Now, Dave, this year, defenseman Zdeno Chara and center Joe Thornton are being inducted into the NHL's Hall of Fame. Got any good tales about those two Bruins during your 17 years there?
Yeah, well, Joe was there. He was there my first 5 years and then got traded to San Jose, and probably not a great trade on the Bruins.
I would think
part
not.
of it, to say the least.
Yeah.
But I always used to joke with Joe, and we used to call it, there's no bad days on Planet Joe. Like, he was always in a good mood. He was always happy-go-lucky, and you could see he had so much raw talent.
What made him an NHL Hall of Famer, though?
His consistency.
Was it?
Yeah, played forever, consistently good, great vision on the ice, great passer. I saw somewhere, Bill, he was the only player in the history of the league to get traded by a team and then that same season win the league MVP award, and that's what he did.
What? I had no
He
idea.
got traded by the Bruins,
Yeah.
and then went on to have a great season in San Jose and was a league MVP. So, but just his consistency, but his love for everything around the game. There's rumor he's still in San Jose. He just retired he jumped around after San Jose, and I think he was in Toronto and Florida, but he still has a home in San Jose. My understanding is, to this day, when the Sharks are in town, I think he's officially been hired by them, player development.
Yes.
But he still, even before that, would be around the rink. I just think he loves it so much. He loves the camaraderie of the locker room. Even when he was done playing, he'd wouldn't go on the ice at practice, but just hang around and shoot the breeze with the guys. So he's a unique character. And Zdeno Chara was kind of, to me, Bill, the guy that when the Bruins started their turnaround, I mentioned my first handful of years, they weren't very good.
Right.
When they signed him as a free agent, which would have been in the summer of 2006.
Okay.
That started things going in a much different direction for them as an organization. Now, it wasn't immediate. His first year, they had signed him and Mark Savard as kind of their two big signings. That first year wasn't very good. Dave Lewis was their coach. They missed the playoffs. They made a coaching change. That's when they brought in Claude Julien, as you mentioned. But Chara was the guy that set the tone from just how hard he worked. And he literally was a towering presence for them.
How tall was he?
6'9" off skates.
Off skates.
You know, let's call him 7 feet on skates.
Yes.
Right? But just his day, him and Patrice Bergeron were the two guys that really that set the tone. And you know, same thing with Chara, his consistency. You know how hard he worked.
Did you ever interview him?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah,
tell me, how was he with as an interview?
He was great. He was.
Because English was second language.
Oh
for
yeah,
him, right?
but I think he speaks like 6 languages.
Wow. Okay.
I'm lucky to speak one. But he, and you know, on air,
yes,
pretty serious guy.
Okay.
But he had a pretty dry wit off camera. Like he would, you know, he could be. He had a goofy side to him, but he's so, you know, he's just such an athletic guy. His father was like a Greco-Roman wrestler in the Olympics back in the day for the old Czechoslovakia before the split.
Yeah.
Chara's Slovak, but you know, back then his father was an Olympic athlete. Chara would blow it away on every fitness test for the Bruins. He climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, just something to do. He ran the Boston Marathon. This is after his playing days.
Wow.
Most athletes, I think, once they're done playing, they kind of want to take a break from all the physical fitness stuff.
Not him.
That's not him. It's not at all. You know, we've seen him a little bit over the years, and he looks like he might be in even better. It's different shape. You know, he's kind of leaner. I guess if he'd run marathons, that would happen. But just he was kind of I say him and Bergeron were the two guys that you followed suit. You know, if your two best players or your two hardest working players, it's hard for the rest of the team not to follow along in line. And he set that tone for them. Helped real big time.
Now, goalie Tim Thomas. Do you have a story about him?
Yeah, well, you know, and he was that Cup team. He was the man.
Absolutely.
He was phenomenal how good he played, and won the Conn Smythe as MVP of the playoffs. You know, Timmy was a different bird. And
how so?
Unique, had his own thoughts on things. You know, he didn't. You probably remember this, Bill. He created a bit of an uproar. He did not go to the White House when the Bruins won it.
Yes, that's okay.
Yeah.
How did that flow with the administration as far as
not
the Boston
great.
Bruins? Okay.
Not great.
Yeah.
I think they felt it was a team thing, and he should be with the team. And you know, Timmy felt that he had his own feelings and didn't want to go, and to each his own. But I'll back it up. When he was he was kind of on the bubble between the P Bruins and the Boston Bruins back in 06, 07. And I was still living in Warwick at the time, making the drive. So if Timmy had a condo, him and his wife had an apartment or whatever in North Attleboro. So if we would fly out of Hanscom Field, and the great Johnny Busick, Chief Hall of Famer, Bruins Hall of Famer, Hockey Hall of Famer, he was our traveling secretary on the road. So he would say to me, if we were coming back to Hanscom Field and Timmy was getting sent back down, a lot of times Timmy would get a ride up to the airport, but then have no way to get back to North Attleboro. So I would drive him. This must have happened a half a dozen times.
Okay.
We would carpool.
Wow, all right.
And we had some
interesting
conversations on how he saw the world, and we all see it differently. And I remember I got a flat tire one night, like taking the exit ramp to go to his place. Left my car at his place, borrowed his wife's car to get back to Warwick. But Timmy was, it still is very much his own man, you know, and I do respect that. And I'll tell you what he did for that team that year was, you know, in the playoffs was legendary. And
that's standing on his head, going over and making those, as they said.
Well,
right?
And as I said to you before, you know, the Bruins built a 4-0 lead after the second period in Game 7 of the final. And that's kind of what I was thinking, Bill, was there's no way they're going to lose. There's no way. And he didn't go, it was a shutout. He didn't give up any goals. Yeah. I think they were up 3-0 and added an empty netter, but whatever the scenario was, there's no way he was giving up that lead. So, yeah, he's, you know, I'm happy he got in the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame here within the last year or two.
Okay.
And it was good to see he was back you know, he's kind of back in the mix a little bit because he had, you know, I feel Terry, he had some concussion problems over the years, and I think wanted to kind of get away from the game. And so to see him kind of back around it was great.
Good. Now, Dave, in 2017, you were hired as the very first television play-by-play broadcaster for the Vegas Golden Knights. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Took me a little while in order to get there, but that's all right.
Yeah.
So tell us the stories of how that all worked out for you and how you ended up in Vegas.
Yeah, I don't know, it's kind of a circuitous route, Bill.
Great stories, though.
Yeah, you know, so I had done the Bruins at that point for 17 years on radio, and if you throw in the 7 years in the minor leagues, it was 24 years of radio. And you know, you get this thought every once in a while in the back of your head, like, what's next? What's the next challenge? And for me, television was going to be the next thing.
Makes sense.
Makes
so,
sense.
Yes.
But I wasn't just going to pick up and go anywhere. I mean, I used to have to weigh radio in Boston or TV in city X, Y, or Z. Well, you know, the Bruins radio job is, having done it for a long time, is one of the top 5 radio play-by-play jobs in the NHL.
Hometown boy
Hometown,
again,
the whole
right?
9 yards,
Yes.
right? So I had started to do a package of TV games for NBCSN. I did some college hockey for NBCSN back in 2013, 14, 15. And after the first game I did for them, I thought, TV, there was an adrenaline rush to the TV thing. And I thought I'd love to try and do this one day. Here's the problem. Nobody else was thinking that. There was nobody else banging the door. Hey, Dave, would love to hire you. Nobody really cared.
Yeah.
But when Vegas got a team, the director of media relations for the Bruins is a real good friend and still is to this day, Eric Tosi. And he had left the Bruins to become the vice president of communications for the Vegas Golden Knights.
Okay.
So it's a step up.
Yes.
And before he left, he had to leave the Bruins like early season. Like my recollection is November, December of 2016, because they had nothing in Vegas, expansion team. They didn't have a staff. They had nothing. So he had to go out and hire everybody. And we had a coffee. We were on the road in Washington, D.C. His last road trip was with the team was in D.C. And I said, hey, let's have a coffee here. So I said, if you have any say in your TV announcer, keep me somewhere in the back of your mind. And he said, really, you would leave? And I said, yeah. He said, you would leave the Bruins radio? I said, yeah, if the right opportunity came along. And he said, okay. And I said, no guarantees. I mean, there were 200 people, Bill, between my job and my partner's job, and first ever team in Vegas. Everyone was kicking the doors down.
Yes.
So anyway, because I explained it to him, I said, look, you know, you've taken a step up. You know, that old saying, there's a bit of a glass ceiling you feel sometimes. And I felt like I was getting a little bit pigeonholed as just a radio announcer, and I felt, given the right opportunity, I could probably do TV. And I said, you know, I mean, at that point, Jack Edwards is still doing the Bruins. I said, you know, Jack's, you know.
He's not going anywhere.
He's not going anywhere.
Right.
And I'm not getting any younger. And these opportunities are few and far between. So anyway, that was like in November of 2016. Now it's June of 2017. So that's a lot of months that have gone by, and I really hadn't heard anything. And my contract was up with the Sports Hub in Boston. And I went in to negotiate a new one because why wouldn't I?
Correct.
And so I had kind of worked that out. And then but we hadn't signed anything. And back then, CBS Radio ran all that in New York. There's now no more real CBS Radio, but you had to get everything finalized through them. It took a little while to do that. So, I don't know, within a week or so, he was in Vegas, Eric Tosi was in Vegas, and he called me and he said, hey, let's chat some more about the TV job.
Really?
And I'm like,
After like 13,
8 months.
14, 8 months?
8 months. So I
Okay.
was like,
Yeah, let's do it, right?
sure. But, and to his credit, and to the Golden Knights organization's credit, they wanted it all above board, and it's the way to do it. You know, I didn't, especially after all those years doing the Bruins games, I'm not a big fan of nobody knows anything, and then somebody's out the back door, and, you know, we wanted to keep it all done properly. So I had to go back to my boss and say, hey, look, at the Sports Hub, and say, hey, you know, you've heard they're getting a team in Vegas, and I tried to downplay it. And I've been contacted by somebody out there about maybe if I had an interest in the TV job. And I said, I don't know if it's going to lead to anything. Probably not. But can you give me a little time to let this breathe? I want to explore it. And I'll tell you what, Bill, they were unbelievable. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
good.
To their credit.
Yeah,
You
good
know,
for
and I
you.
think, you know, I'd been there a long time and,
Exactly.
you know, done some decent work and whatever. So anyway, I don't know, it was about 6 weeks later, maybe a month, 6 weeks, something. So now I have a couple more talks with the Golden Knights. And so finally,
On the phone?
on the phone. I
Okay.
never did go out for an interview. There was talk about going out there, but that never happened. It was all over the phone.
All right.
But with lengthy conversations about how I would approach our broad, you know, because, you know, it's easy to sit here now with all the success that teams had, but nobody thought they were going to be any good
For a long time.
for a long time.
Yes.
So how do you handle that? You know, we had philosophical conversations, whatever. So what ended up happening was we kind of went back and forth, and they made me an offer, and we kind of figured out the math. And then I have a home down in East Matunic here, down in Snug Harbor that I come back to for the summer, and the property lines are separated by these, I think, beautiful stone walls, you know. And so my boss at the sports hub texted me, this was like late July or something, and said, hey, the paperwork just came back from New York for your new contract for the Bruins. When do you want to come in and sign it? And it was the same day that the Golden Knights had worked out the math with me.
This happens to you often in your career.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my,
days.
nerve-wracking is also.
Oh,
I'm like,
but all
oh.
good stuff.
So
Yes.
the reason I bring up the stone wall is I remember
Yeah.
wearing a path out, walking back and forth, and I remember thinking, well,
You're leaving your comfort zone.
and I've got to call my boss at the sports hub, and he was great. And he said, I said, look, I told you I'd keep you, you know, abreast of what's going on in Vegas, and they made me an offer to do their TV, and I'm going to accept the offer. And he said, Dave, I'm not surprised. He said, I kind of thought this might happen sooner or later. You've earned it. And then I talked to the boss. That was Mike Thomas. Then I talked to Mark Hannon, who ran all of CBS radio in Boston, and the next day. And he said, you'll go out there. You'll have a blast. You'll kill it. The team will kill it. So they handled it. I could not have been more impressed, Bill, with how they handled it, because, you know, they could have taken a different approach. Hey, we've agreed on a new contract. You know, I know you haven't signed it yet, but we've got an agreement here. But they, I think, knew that I was kind of ready to try something new and fresh and different.
But if so, with you leaving, whoever's going to get the job after you can, at least they'll say, this is the way to take the ladder up to television too. So
Hopefully.
it's going to help them.
Yeah, but you know, and it took me a long time. I mean, 17 years of radio, but anyway, that's how it, you know, and then picked up everything and moved to Vegas. And, you know, I had been to Vegas 3 or 4 times, you know, you take a long weekend. But to live there, it's a whole different experience. And it's been,
we'll talk about
yeah, it's been unbelievable.
Yeah. And so your color analyst was Shane
Knighty.
Knighty?
Yeah.
How did that all work?
Yeah, Shane played.
Did you know him?
Yes. I knew him because he played for the Bruins. He played for the Bruins twice.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
He's a
that.
defenseman for the Bruins.
Okay. And he
Tough.
knew you.
And he knew me. I always tell Shane, I always joke, he was tough, physical, fought. I always tell Shane, I always joke around, when he played for the Bruins, he wouldn't talk to me.
Oh.
I was just a radio schmuck.
Oh, okay.
That's not true, but I always tell that.
Sure.
Yeah, he would just ignore me back then. You know? But Shane played, I always joke around, he played for a lot of teams in the NHL, but, you know, somebody kept calling him, you know, to give him a job. But he ended up retiring from the Bruins, and he was on the Cup team in 2011.
Yeah.
And then he retired. He was done. And he ended up going, he's from Manitoba in Canada, and his hometown team would have been the Winnipeg Jets. So he went back to Winnipeg and did their radio and TV for 6 years. Started on radio, then slid over to TV. And I think he and his family, the winters in Winnipeg are no picnic. You want to talk about cold. Cold,
Yes.
cold, cold, cold. And I know it gets cold back here.
But not like
Yeah,
Canada.
it's different.
Yes.
So I think they had enough. And I think, like me, he was drawn to the allure of Vegas, new, fresh team. What's that all about? There was something there.
Exciting.
So the funny part is, and he would have known Eric Tosi because he played for the Bruins. You know, Shane was with the Bruins when Eric was there. So what ended up happening was, neither of us, though, Shane nor myself, knew that. I didn't know he was going after the color analyst job, and he didn't know I was going after the TV play-by-play job. Mm-hmm. So we both agree, and then I said to Eric Tosi, I said, by the way, who's my partner going to be? I'm thinking in my own head, what if it's some jerk? And he said, what do you think about Shane Knighty? I said, oh, thank the Lord above. And
Another one. Dave, just in the right place at the right time.
Because, like we knew each other a bit. And so I remember calling him. And I was back here. I was in Rhode Island in that summer. And we must have talked for a half hour on the phone. And then we had never sat next to each other doing a game. And the first exhibition game we did, we had instant chemistry. And it's been that way now this will be going on season 9.
Now, Dave, once again, you are working during another tragic shooting, this time at Mandalay Bay, that killed 59 people attending a Jason Aldean concert in Vegas. And it was unbelievable the way it all turned out for you. So give us, the franchise that just started, played a couple of away games, and then go.
Yeah, what happened, Bill, is actually, so it was October 1, which is a sacred day in Vegas now. Those shootings it was a country fest, and as you mentioned, it was actually 5 days before they had ever played a game. We played some exhibition games. Shootings were October 1. I want to say our first regular season game was October 6th and 7th. We started in Dallas, then went to Arizona. And I remember just thinking that first game in Dallas, like, here's Shane and I, like, nobody knows who we are.
Yeah.
We had been in Vegas. I was there a month. I was there, I think, 3 weeks when the shootings happened. So, but thinking back to what happened with the Boston Marathon bombings, I remember coming on the air and we said, look, we're going to try and help heal as best we can and just try to have some fun, because you try to keep in mind the people that are watching these games, Lord knows what they're going through, but they don't want to think about what's just happened. They want to watch a hockey game, So we just remember, we're going to try and have some fun with this and bring you some enjoyment, even if it's for a couple hours, So they ended up winning their first 2 games, incredibly, and then came home, and the home opener was in Vegas, and Derek Englund, who was a defenseman for the Golden Knights, but married a girl from Vegas, lived in Vegas for 15 years before they had a franchise there. He made a very emotional speech before the home opener, because each player came out with somebody that was affected, family member, first responder, doctors, nurses. They all get escorted out.
Wow.
And it was, again, to think about it now, and they ended up winning that game. But I say, Bill, so that bond, I think, between the team and the community in Vegas was formed in those very early days after the shootings. And I don't think that'll ever be broken. I think that's cemented in because the team was so good in terms of going out and visiting, getting to hospitals, visiting with families, just to try to help, to try to help in any way possible. And but that bond has been there, since the beginning, and I don't think it'll ever be broken.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
Now, Dave, you've lived a charmed broadcaster's life, in my opinion. So now when 2023, you have the opportunity to be part of a second Stanley Cup championship team. Talk about that season. So you have Calder Cup behind you. You got the Stanley Cup with the Bruins, and now Vegas goes out of nowhere and wins the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
Talk about all that.
Just lucky, Bill. Well, it's funny that, getting back to that first season, they went to the Stanley Cup final that first year. Was off,
They did?
Greatest expansion team in the history of sports, right?
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah. So they broke all the regs.
How exciting was that for you?
It's nuts. Like, again, we thought they were not going to be good.
Yes.
And it turned out they were very good. But anyway, to get to 2023, Bruce Cassidy, who had been the Bruins coach, got fired in Boston, and within a week or 10 days, he was hired in Vegas. And Bruce tells the story. He knew nobody in Vegas but me and Shane Knighty. He just knew us, the two dopey TV broadcasters. But no, the only difference in that scenario for me was after the first round of the playoffs in the NHL, there's no local television. So it's all like the national stuff. So there really wasn't a lot for me to do in the second round, third round, and then the Cup final, but they would find stuff for you to do. Social media stuff, pregame show, postgame show. So we traveled a bit during the next couple of rounds, and then in the final we were there for all 5 games. And it's interesting. We have a friend, Shane and I have a friend in Vegas that's very generous, and he has a suite at T-Mobile Arena. And Shane and I just didn't want to go up in the press box and watch the games at home. It's kind of boring up there, you know?
Yeah.
So our friend Dave said, well, we actually asked him, do you have room for a couple of vagabonds in your suite? Could we hang out in your suite for the games?
Yeah.
And he's like, absolutely. So then they kept winning. So then he became superstitious. He's like, you have to come to us. So when they won the cup,
Yeah.
we were standing in his suite, which was awesome.
So you were the lucky charm.
Yeah, well, I guess. But the funny part about it, Bill, is so the Golden Knights won the cup June 13th of 2023. The P Bruins won the Calder Cup June 13th of 1999. So it
Really?
was 23 years to the day.
To the day.
And I didn't want to talk about it leading up to it. And again, nobody else would care but me.
Right.
But I didn't want to jinx it. So yeah, and it was so what would that math be? Every 12 years. P Bruins Calder Cup in 99, Bruins Cup in 11, Vegas in 23. So 12 years from now, like I'll be all done. But but yeah, so it was, to be part of it again was just, again, I'll come back to it. There's people that have done my job for double the time I've done it and have never been around a team that's won it.
Yes.
So to be around 3 between Providence, Boston, and Vegas has been pretty incredible.
And now, Dave, once again, you participated in your second Stanley Cup parade, this time down the Vegas Strip.
Yeah.
So I want you to compare the 2011 Boston experience with the Vegas experience.
Yeah, I mean, not as many people just because it's a smaller city.
How do they transport you then? Not duck boats?
Not on duck boats. Double-decker buses.
Okay.
Yeah.
Open-ended up top?
Open-ended,
Yeah, okay.
yeah.
Like the ones you see out in London?
Yes, pretty much.
Okay, got
and
it.
And they did it later in the day because I want to say the parade was like June 17th. So it was starting to get a little toasty in Vegas. So I think the parade started at like 4, but 250,000 people. And they also wanted the lights of the Vegas Strip to start to be illuminating late afternoon.
Okay.
So
It's all a show with Vegas,
oh
right?
my God, Bill. Yeah, so to leave T-Mobile Arena, kind of come out the back lot and then swing up the Strip. And same thing, I mean, there's 30 people deep. By the time you got to like Caesar's Palace and the Bellagio fountains and New York, and the Cosmo, and people were, they were having a couple of beverages.
Of course.
And we had some on our bus. So I remember people like yelling at Shane and I. We were on the same bus. And they would say, hey, can we exchange drinks? So they would lob us like their beverage. And I'd say, you better catch this, because I was afraid if I hit them in the head.
Yeah, you got a lawsuit.
Yeah,
right,
next thing
yes.
you know. So we were exchanging, but it was unbelievable. You think about it, Bill. So that was year 6 of the franchise, and Bill Foley, the owner of the Golden Knights, his famous phrase when they got the team was playoffs in 3, cup in 6. Well, they went to the final the first year, and they won it in year 6.
Yeah.
So our Stanley Cup rings, on the inside of it has cup in 6, and Bill's initials are WPF. But to get the end of the rally was at T-Mobile Arena outside in the plaza. And Shane and I emceed it, and there were
you did?
20,000 people in the plaza, as far as you could see.
How was that?
It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. It was just, as far as your eye could see, there were people. And I think everyone was, as you'd imagine, was having a good time. We were having a good time. The players were having a good time. But to be, the Bruins parade was great, but there was no rally at the end. It just kind of ended. We went back to the Garden.
Yeah.
This was 20,000 people in that plaza, and we introduced Bruce Cassidy, George McPhee, our president of hockey operations, Bill Foley, our owner, and a couple of players. And it was, again, just to be part of that. You would never think it would be possible to be part of one of them, let alone a few of them. So yeah, it was great.
Absolutely. And we got about 5 minutes left, but I want to know, Dave, what is life like for a boy from Pawtucket now living and working in Las Vegas? Totally different.
Yeah,
of course.
The
but
boy from Pawtucket
Yeah.
would never have thought he'd be living in Vegas.
Yeah?
That's for sure.
Okay. What is it like? I mean,
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I tell people,
but it's not like the Vegas Strip. So you
No.
live outside the city?
I live in Summerlin, about 20 minutes west.
Okay, like a suburb?
Yep, out in Red Rock Canyon. It's gorgeous.
Is it really?
Views of the mountains, but we have views of the Strip.
Yeah.
I tell people, look, people in Vegas, there's real people with real families, real communities, real jobs. I did it. You associate Vegas with the Strip, and I get that. But look, I worked and lived in Boston a long time. I never walked the Freedom Trail. probably to my own detriment.
Never was in Slater Mill in Pawtucket.
Never, I think maybe at a school field trip. I was on a duck boat once when the Bruins won it.
Yeah.
You know, but I say, like, if you lived in Washington, D.C., you probably wouldn't go to the Lincoln Memorial regularly unless you had family coming in that wanted to go. So that's in Vegas, but I love that if you live in Vegas, you dabble in the Strip. Concerts, great meals. Everybody comes through there from an entertainment standpoint. I love music, so that's been unbelievable to be able to take advantage of that. But the quality of life is unbelievable. I always say, Bill, there's no real traffic. It's not Boston, New York, LA, Dallas. You can get around pretty easy. And where the team practices is 5 minutes from my house. That's where our offices are.
Oh.
I don't even get on the highway. I go around, take a couple of rotaries, and I'm there.
Wow.
And to get to the Strip is 20 minutes, like legitimately 20 minutes. It's not 20 minutes that turns into 3 days. So that to me is, the weather's always great. The summers get hot, but you know, I'm not there most of the summer. It snows, but it snows up in the mountains. I don't own a shovel, you know?
Yeah.
I still own a winter coat because I travel with the team and I go to Buffalo and Winnipeg and Edmonton and Minnesota. But the quality of life out there is unbelievable. We've absolutely loved it it's hard to believe it's been 8 years.
And now because you're on television, Dave, you have a recognizable face. So do people go over and see, hey, you know, I know you, Dave?
Sometimes.
Yeah?
Well, as you know, Bill, heavy makeup. No, it does change and there was a certain level, I guess, of notoriety doing the Bruins radio because the team was good and the Sports Hub was a huge station. But the TV thing does change things, but in a good way. People have been great, but if you're on that box, it's a whole different deal.
Yeah. Now, Dave, we've got 1 minute left in the show. I want you to go over and give us words of wisdom for someone who wants to follow in the footsteps of Pawtucket native Dave Goucher.
I would tell them, Bill, if they want to get a job in the NHL or whatever field, and you really want to go at it, you really have to go after it and be willing to make sacrifices. I spent 7 years in the minor leagues. There was no money in it. I was on buses from here to Hershey, to Glens Falls, to Albany, to Syracuse, to bus all over the place. But I think if you really want to do it, you have to be willing to pay the price to do it. And it's certainly for me, it did not happen overnight. It took me a lot of years.
It certainly did.
But that's okay. There's dues to be paid, and I think there's a lot of value in climbing the rungs on that ladder, because once you get there, you really appreciate it because you've paid your dues over a long period of time.
Well, Dave, it's been a distinct pleasure to have you back on Good Sports. Yours is a great story of perseverance and hard work, as you just said, and achieving success in a very competitive line of work. So Pawtucket is very proud to call you native son there.
Well, thank you, Bill. So we'll make a date 30 years from now.
Yes.
We'll come back and do it again.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that works for us,
We'll
right?
both be a little bit older then, but that's okay.
Well, great job with that.
Pleasure.
Dave.
Thanks, Bill.
You're very welcome. I'm Bill Mulholland for Good Sports Classics. Good night.